Hey, it's Matt Pinfield. This is new and approved on KLOS. I'm very excited to be here with a man that I admire, and there's just so much musical taste that we have in common that when we finally met, I was like, we should have met years ago. But I'm so glad that we finally have and become friends. And he's got a new tour coming up, and he just did something amazing with Deep Purple and their classic seminal album, Machine Head. We're going to talk all about that right now. I'm here with Dweezil Zappa. Dweezil.
Hey, how are you? Thanks for having me.
It's good to see you again. You know,
Yeah, likewise.
thank you for having me over at your home studio, man. That was a great experience to come over and be there in your studio. I love that, and I was going to say that it was, for me, what a great opportunity, because I love the Deep Purple album. Machine Head is one of my favorite rock records.
How can you not love it? If you love rock music, it has to be among your favorites.
Yeah, it's incredible. And to be in your studio where you mixed not only a new stereo mix of the record, but an Atmos mix of it, which was a full surround sound experience. And to look at the way that you actually did that and how it works was an education for me. But it was also just a passionate way to hear those tracks again, to hear things I didn't hear before, you know?
Well, that's kind of the exciting thing about the format of Atmos anyway, because you have all these other speakers other than just the two stereo speakers, and that extra real estate gives you a chance to make the music have some kind of different details that become exposed. And the tricky part is sometimes an artist might not want things to be as exposed as they could be in that format, because they might be afraid, I don't know if I really want somebody to hear every little detail, every little nuance. But when they are okay with it and you get to hear some of those things, that's the experience that you're talking about, where you hear stuff you didn't realize was even in the song. So you get down to the point where you almost hear the fingers on the strings of the guitar, and there's just room for things to poke out. But it's also in an environment that has its own ambience, and you really feel like you're inside the music a lot more. So to me, it's a very exciting format to work in, not only for records like the Machine Head record, but a new record that you might make from the ground up with Atmos in mind. That'll be a totally different experience, because instead of hearing it in stereo for the first time, you would hear it in Atmos from the very beginning, and you would become accustomed to the fact that something might fly around the room or have a lot more movement than would be in stereo. And it wouldn't be jarring because you're hearing it that way for the first time, as opposed to, I know it in stereo so well, and now if something's moving, that might be distracting to me. You know, so it's kind of the Wild West now.
Yeah, it's amazing when I listened to those mixes and you played them back for me, and also being able to see and visualize, the way it works in a studio with Atmos, and you can actually have, these, as the sounds are going, you have like a visual monitor to see where they are in the landscape, the 360 around you, which was a really eye-opening and beautiful experience for me. And we got to talk about the fact, Dweezil, that, this record is such a big part of your life and your legacy and history, with your dad being, not only one of the most innovative and interesting and intelligent men in the history of rock and just modern music, but it was that experience that, really gave birth to that album completely. I mean, that happened. So let me ask you about this. When was the first time you became aware of Smoke on the Water and then knew that it was about this experience your dad had with the Mothers in Montreux? Tell me about that.
Well, when I heard the song the first time, it would have been on the radio, and I would have probably been 9, 10, 11, 12, somewhere in there. But when I started getting interested in guitar, when I was really thinking, okay, I want to learn how to play this instrument, I was 12 years old. And of course, that was a song that was on KLOS. It was on KMAT, which was the other radio station in Los Angeles at that time. So you could hear that song quite a bit, but it was really about the guitar riff and the overall sound of the band. I didn't really notice that my dad's name was mentioned in it, because I'm so into the music side when I listen to music that the lyrics almost don't compute for years later.
Yeah, right. It's because it's nothing you
I don't
drawn
focus on
to.
it. There's plenty of songs I've heard hundreds or thousands of times that I couldn't tell you even one lyric from the song. It just doesn't register for me that way. But when I did find out about it, I thought, oh, that's pretty cool because I really like this band. I like Deep Purple. I like the guitar playing in it. Richie Blackmore had a really cool personality and character to his playing and the sound. And so I just thought it was a unique, cool thing that my dad was getting name checked in this song. But when you start to realize what really happened, and it literally was some jackass who shot a flare gun into the ceiling and burned the place to the ground while people were inside, and they had to get out as fast as they could because it filled up with smoke and flames, and they had to use some of my dad's equipment to throw it through glass windows to make more egress for people to escape. And it was just a crazy thing that my dad had happened to him on tour. And then even more crazy, as I found out recently, there was another incident where my dad got attacked by some other jackass who got on stage and pushed him into the orchestra pit, where he ended up breaking his clavicle, broke his leg. But that happened only 2 days later.
And that was in the UK, right?
Yeah. So it's like, what was going on that tour? That was some bad news.
Crazy stuff happened in 71, 72, right?
Yeah.
It was like nuts. I remember seeing the footage of your dad at that period of time in that nutcase that was, where was that? Like the Royal Albert Hall or something?
No, I think it was the Rainbow.
Yeah, in London,
Yeah.
That was just crazy.
Rainbow Theater, I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody out of his mind, probably on acid or something. Who knows?
Yeah.
Speed. But
Something
whatever
not
it was.
good.
Somebody not in a good place. And that was interesting how, in the documentary, one of the documentaries about your dad, but one of the great ones, it talks about that and, kind of how it reset his thinking for a while. But I just love, excuse me, I love that, this song "Smoke on the Water," which is like a starting point for so many people to pick up an instrument, an album that affects people that way, a thing that people thought they could play immediately, even if they weren't playing it right, back when they first started playing the song, because it was, the amount of chords in there. But
there's something about that when you think of certain songs that have such classic riffs, and just a riff in general is a thing that has disappeared from modern music. It used to be that you would have a singular type of phrase that was played on a guitar mainly, and because of the personality of the guitarist and the tone and the vibe of it, you got into the song straight away. It wasn't about all these other production elements. It was the real hook of the song. So Smoke on the Water or Purple Haze or songs that have these immediate things where you get into it as soon as you hear the guitar, that's a really interesting way of thinking about how songs were written back in the day and what guitar players really brought to it. So you had guys like Jimmy Page or Richie Blackmore or Jimi Hendrix that were great at writing these small micro-encapsulated things that would stick in your head that also inspired you to pick up the guitar because it was so cool sounding that you're like, I got to find a way to do that.
Yeah.
And certainly Smoke on the Water is one of those riffs because it's simple sounding, and compared to other things, it is easier to play on guitar, but it's the feel and the timing and the way that he attacks the strings that gives it the personality that makes you really go, oh yeah, I'm into this. Because if you hear somebody play it badly, you're not that into it.
Yeah, exactly. No matter what it is. I mean, it's so true. And there's something about when the band comes in around a guitarist on a song like that, and how it builds.
Yeah, the bass line, the drums, everything. It's so good.
Now tell me, I know that you were working with the surviving members, which are most of the guys from Deep Purple, approving the different mixes that you did. What was that experience like when you had to present them with the songs?
I didn't get to present it to them in person or anything. It was, they all live in different places, so it was a little bit challenging because I would turn in a mix and then it would take a few days for it to circulate to the different people in different places, and then they might have different comments, and then I would have to do some tweaks and then send it back and goes through another round of that stuff. But it was all still on this escalated pace. They really wanted it to be done quickly because they had a tour planned and they had some other things. So it was the accelerated process led to a couple of times where I had to work in 1 week. There were a few times where I had to work over 24 hours in just in succession to be able to deliver the thing that they needed. And that was not really the easiest thing to do because you're trying to make good decisions and make sure that you're not making mistakes when you're printing stuff and you're tired. And anyway, it all worked out. They ended up approving the stuff and enjoying what was brought to the mixes. But from what I've heard from the people that have heard it now that it's out there in the world, it's a lot of the same things like what you were saying. You're hearing things that you didn't hear before. There's a little bit more power to the band itself because there's extended frequency ranges, there's more bass, there's just a little bit more girth to the sound and also a little clarity. You can hear the vocals a little better. So the goal was really to take what was already there and just polish it up a little bit and add a little bit more weight to it. I didn't want to make it sound like something it never was because there's really no point in that. It was already a great sounding record and people have this experience with it. So I didn't want to change it too much and they didn't want it to change too much either. But as far as Atmos goes, I did want to have at least some movement in each song. So each song is its own character, its own audio movie, and that was my approach.
Yeah, and it was amazing what you were able to do with that. It was really cool. Tell me about Dweezil. You said really got interested in guitar around 12, but you did your first record when you were very young, and there was this relationship with Eddie Van Halen, who I know you love. Tell me about how that came about, because I love the fact that Eddie worked with you when you were 12.
Yeah, it was a little bit out of the blue, really. I had been really into listening to Van Halen, and at 12 years old, that was the stuff that was on the radio. I was 12 in 1982, and so Fair Warning was the newest record, and that became my favorite record of theirs of all time. I love all the early stuff, and the later stuff too, but Fair Warning I just love this. I got it, I'm listening to it all the time. And there was one song, Unchained, where you hear somebody talking to David Lee Roth is, saying, hey man, that suit is you, kind of thing. And then, come on, Dave, give me a break. So that phrase, I was always wondering, who is that? Is that Edward? Is that the producer? Is it Ted Templeman? I don't know who it is. But one day we got a call to our house out of the blue. And this is back in the day when you could have a phone on the wall and it could have different lines that you could select and you could answer in one room, but somebody could pick up in another room and listen. So this call comes in and it's a guy purporting to be Edward Van Halen. And my mom answers and she's like, this guy says it's Eddie Van Halen. Get on the phone and see if you could tell. And I have no reference point. It's not like now where you can see a ton of interviews.
Yeah. I mean, it was all you had was the magazines, the albums, and if they were on KLOS or stations like that back
So there was no reference point. But the only thing that stuck in my mind was, well, does it sound like the guy saying, come on, Dave, give us a break? I'm like, I don't know. So, of course, I want it to be Edward Van Halen, but I'm 12. I can't approve or disapprove of who this person is on the phone. My dad ends up getting on the phone, talking to him, and 15 minutes later, he shows up at the house. It was Edward Van Halen. He was calling to talk to my dad for some reason. They ended up connecting. He comes over to the house, and in my mind, he's walking up the steps, and he might as well have been backlit with a smoke machine and a superhero costume, because this was the greatest moment of all time. It was like a Star Wars movie come true for a 12-year-old kid. The superhero is walking up the stairs, and he's got a purple Stratocaster-style guitar with a piece of black tape over the name on the headstock, so you don't know what the logo is. And this was right before he announced that he was going to be using Kramer guitars and endorsing them. So he walks in with this purple guitar, and within seconds, I've made him plug in, and I said, okay, play Mean Street, play Eruption. And I got to see him play this stuff up close, and it was burned into my mind. And so the whole way that it came about was a mystery to me, but later it unraveled, because years later I ended up talking to Steve Vai, who was in my dad's band at that same time. And he said, I had gone to see Edward play with Alan Holdsworth at the Roxy. I had talked to him, said I played with Frank Zappa. He said, I like Frank Zappa. And then Steve was like, well, I could connect you guys. So he gave Steve his number, or vice versa. And then Edward ended up calling Steve, but Steve's roommate answered because Steve wasn't there. who gave Edward my dad's phone number. Edward called my dad, but then Steve found out that Edward called. He goes, "Oh, I'm going to get fired because I gave out Frank Zappa's phone number." But it didn't happen that way. My dad ended up calling Steve and said, "Hey, come over." So at a certain point, at 8 or 9 at night, Edward had just gotten there. My dad's there. It's me. My dad calls Steve Vai. Steve Vai comes over, and now this purple guitar is passing around in a circle, and we're playing this guitar for like 2-3 hours talking about music. And that was the first time that I got to meet Edward Van Halen. And I had a Little League baseball game the next day, which I was like, I don't care about baseball anymore. I'm all in on guitar at this point.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And so he even produced one of the things that you did as well.
Yeah, the very first thing that I did was a song called My Mother's a Space Cadet, and it had a flip side, which was called Crunchy Water, because, at 12 years old, you're writing cutting-edge lyrics.
Yeah.
And so this was also something that I don't really know how it ended up happening. I just remember my dad saying, "Hey, do you want to record a song?" I'm like, "Yeah, that'd be cool." Well, Edward's going to come in and produce it with Don Landy, who recorded the early Van Halen records.
Stuff, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So they came in and they worked with us. It was me and my other 12-year-old friends, and we learned the ropes of recording in those couple days that we worked on those songs with Edward and Don.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was super crazy.
And I'm sure, like, you're in awe at 12 years old. I mean, at
Oh,
this age, you'd probably go back and say, and want to know about certain sounds that were on Fair Warning, right? Like you'd go,
"Oh, yeah.
What about that?" So, in Mainstream, is there, you would ask something like that because you become a producer yourself and an incredible player. And I, want to explain to people, you have this great studio. There's so much really cool equipment. In fact, there's a photo right behind us.
Yeah.
And talk to me about you becoming a producer and recording and your love for the studio and the things that you use for sound, because there's a lot of things in there that I was getting quite an education about that were fascinating to me because I love classic recording too, the way that some of my favorite records were done, over the years. And
the thing about if you love sound and you're really interested in it, you end up researching some things and you learn how to work with it and you try to recreate sounds from the ground up. And I had always been doing that. I was always interested in guitar tones and the sounds that were on records. But, there's a period of time where you really have to learn some of the fundamentals and the basics to really understand how to get the results that are going to be consistent that you're going to want at the end of the day. So over the last 20, maybe 25 years, I had been doing a lot of work and research and recording things on my own. But when I decided, okay, I'm going to build a studio for me, I wanted it to be a sound laboratory where I could do anything I wanted to do and take it to the furthest degree that I could imagine. And I still wanted to be able to get the classic sounds that I love from records. So a lot of the equipment that you're talking about is compressors and mic pre's and things that would have been used in a certain era, let's say from the 60s to maybe the early 80s, where it was kind of the grand era of analog stuff that really created the tones that are on the classic records that we love. And so there's a lot of emphasis on that stuff. So when I'm tracking, I can go ahead and use that as a foundation for the sound and get much closer to the source tones that I want right from the beginning, as opposed to doing something where you just take a mic that has basically no personality and then you say, "Oh, I'll record it flat, dry, and then I'll make it sound like something in the mix." You almost never get where you need to go if you do it like that. You have to have experience in knowing that you can make decisions to get the sound you want from the beginning and build the foundation that way. And that really just takes a lot of experimentation and working with different people and learning stuff, which, as I said, over the past 20, 25 years, that's what I did. And I finally built this really ridiculous studio that could allow me to have the ultimate rock and roll laboratory, but not just in stereo, in Atmos and every other kind of immersive format that you can work in. So it's only recently that I've really put a lot of focus on doing that and working with other people in that way. But I'm having to change gears all of a sudden now because I'm getting ready to go on a tour for the first time in 4 years rather, where I am playing my dad's music again. And that tour starts in August. So over the past 4 years, I was focused mainly on getting the studio working and doing projects. And now I have to start playing guitar again and getting ready for a tour.
Talk to me about what that's like, because, I mean, if you look at the unbelievable catalog of stuff that your dad did from the beginning, like when you talk about the early Mother's records, Freak Out and Absolutely Free, and you go through, We're Only in It for the Money, all the way through, the different solo records and the experiences and experiments that he did. And, a hotbed for your dad was Jersey, because, people loved it. Like when I was growing up, the Mothers was like, when my brother was a teenager, you know what I mean? That's how, because he had Freak Out and Absolutely Free. So like I was like listening to those as a kid.
Those are incredible records.
Love those.
When you listen to what's on those records now, they really stand out as being so far ahead of their time because there's still stuff that is shocking to hear. Not only just because of the content, but the sound choices and the combinations of different things where it's sped up tape machines, and it was so ahead of its time that it still sounds that way now. But imagine back then, this was from another planet. I mean, there was nothing that sounded like it at all. So the main reason I started playing my dad's music after he passed was that I felt like he had made so many contributions to the world of music that weren't really understood or even fully exposed to a wider audience, because the stuff that got on the radio didn't really represent the totality of his music. So if you only ever heard Valley Girl or Don't Eat the Yellow Snow or Dancin' Fool or Bobby Brown or something like that, you really don't know what my dad's music is. That's the smallest percentage of what my dad's music is.
I mean, it's like the spectrum and range of everything. I mean, people really, that documentary that was done a couple of years back was just amazing to me, when it goes through his childhood and everything else, and then getting fascinated with recording and music, and just that there's so many different facets of your dad as a collector of experiences and people, and he helped start a lot of people's careers. You know what I mean? Alice Cooper was one. You know what I mean? That's just the beginning, as well as great players, like Terry Bozzio and all these people.
Vinny Colaiuta and George Duke, and all kinds of people. So the thing is, when I go out to play the music, I try to curate a set list that gives people a very broad spectrum of all the different styles that he played in, and the band plays them commensurate with the way that he played them. So it's an apples to apples comparison. Now, in the case of this tour, I'm doing a lot of stuff that's actually pretty different than I have done in the past, or even that from what my dad did, in the sense that we're doing a lot of hybrid arrangements. We might take one version of a song that has, it starts from an album version, but then it morphs into a version from a live recording from a different year, a different band, and the two are blended together. And we've done that with multiple songs for what's in this set list. So a song from Roxy, because the tour is called Roxpostrophe, because we're focusing on the Roxy and the Apostrophe album, because it's the 50-year anniversary of both albums.
Yeah, but 74, which was a really interesting year in general, for not only for Frank, for your dad, but music in general. It was a really it was a really cool year. I think 74 was great.
You get the rock, you get the funk, you get the cool sounds where they started to get into not using that much reverb, and you got this dry thing where it's kind of more in your face. And that whole era is really kind of my favorite, 74 to maybe 1980 in my dad's world of music. So this tour is going to focus a lot on those things, but a song like A Kid in His Arf, which it goes right into Don't You Ever Watch That Thing on the Roxy album. They do it one way, but that song, Don't You Ever Watch That Thing, before it ever was on an album, the first recording of it was from a live show, and it had a totally different feel, totally different rhythm. So I've split the arrangement. So it starts like the Roxy, and then it goes to the version that precedes the Roxy. And it's almost like a car wreck when it goes into it, because you're so used to how the other one went, and now the rhythm changes so drastically. it's going to be interesting to see what happens to people's faces. And we won't be able to watch. If they try to keep time, they'll throw us off because it's really such a crazy change. It's going to be really interesting to see the reaction, because I don't think most people know this other original version that precedes the Roxy. So that's my point, is that I'm doing things that my dad didn't have a chance to do, but he might have done if he said, oh, you know what, I'm going to blend these two. But I'm doing a little bit more of my own interpretation of some of the music in this case, whereas in the past, I didn't really do that as much. I stayed straight to what the arrangements were from the record.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, as a young kid growing up and then being around and knowing, that, I mean, you were sometimes on the road on tour with your dad as a young kid. You're born in '69. But it was, and then of course he and your mom, Gail. I wanted to ask you, when you started doing, getting out and doing more public stuff, I know I told you before, I love The Running Man. I love you, and you were in Pretty in Pink. But you also did some other TV stuff. We're both veterans of MTV VJ world. We both did that, you and I. Also, like, it was cool. You did a little bit of everything. You did a thing with Lisa Loeb, who's I'm gonna be working with on this cruise, and I love her. But what was your dad's reaction to all that? He encouraged you to, I assume, to really be yourself.
And I think some of the best advice, two things. One was, don't be an asshole. That's good.
Yeah.
And another one was that if you are striving for excellence, you're going to be disappointed because nobody cares. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't, because in his music, he raised the bar and he did what he wanted to do. And the music is so sophisticated and complicated that very few people can actually play it. It also limits the amount of people who could totally understand it. But the ones that do become lifers, and it changes their perspective on what's possible in music. So for me, that was a big thing, is to understand that if you want to do something because you like the challenge and you're doing it because it is innately something that you need to do to fulfill some inner drive, it's not about making money. It's not about being famous. It's about doing something that you want to do because you just love it. And if other people like it, you end up doing something as a career that makes it possible for you to pursue what you like and still keep the lights on. And that's really, at the end of the day, if you can be happy doing the thing because you're doing good work, you have a more fulfilled life creatively, etc. So that was kind of the overall lesson, was he did what he did because he liked it. If somebody else liked it, that was a bonus, but he was going to do it anyway, even if no one liked it.
Yeah, and it's amazing, but he also is such it's an important figure in so many ways when he was speaking out against censorship with the PMRC.
Sure.
And just in general, your dad... he would say exactly what was on his mind, and things that he said even over those years. When you go back and watch old videos now, people have the ability to watch these things on YouTube and through streaming services. It's amazing just what a visionary he was and how he predicted a lot of things. Yeah. He was a very smart, intelligent
He was the rock and roll Nostradamus.
Yeah, it's amazing when you look back, and I love to see that because I enjoy it. The fact that he's there were whole countries and people where he went, where people were thanking him for the things and the contributions that he made.
Yeah, well, he also just did it in a way that other people didn't. So, for example, you mentioned the PMRC. He was in front of the Senate and he was delivering his speech with the opening salvo that was pretty hilarious. It basically said, you're treating this problem, which was them trying to put stickers on records and basically tell people what they could and could not write about. He was saying, you're treating this problem like treating dandruff by decapitation. So it's you just don't have people talking like that in Senate hearings, and this the wit, the acerbic wit that was there, and he couldn't be bulldozed by these people. There was a point in time where one of the senators was trying to say, well, you have children, and would you let your children listen to these songs by Twisted Sister and all this stuff? And he's like, yeah, if they want to, but if not, it's not a big deal. And she was disgusted by it because, she's like, I would be afraid to see the toys you give your children. He's like, come on over. You can look at them.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
I love that set. It was one of the craziest thing was when they were reading the lyrics to the Mentors' Golden Showers. They brought more publicity to a band no one would have ever heard of or ever cared about.
Yeah.
They just sold more records for them.
Yeah, which was the entire point. And my dad stated that. He's like, you're going to put stickers on this, which is only going to drive more interest and more people will listen to it. So if you just ignored it or let parents do their job and not try to have the government get involved and say, what is or isn't valuable in terms of what you should hear or see or listen to, that is the kind of thing that my dad just wanted to make sure that the government stayed out of this censorship process, because it's a very slippery slope, and we've seen it in the past 4 years in government. So it's always been there, but it's worse than ever.
It's crazy times right now, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's amazing. And I'm just glad that I've had the opportunity to go back and watch a lot of those interviews and also the documentary, and which was just really, it blew my girlfriend and I away because she's always been a fan of that. And
my favorite film that's been made about my dad is one that is called "Eat That Question," which is also the title of one of my dad's songs. But that film is just interviews with my dad. There's no narrator, there's nothing. It's just a compendium of interviews with my dad that really tells the story of his beliefs about music and social commentary and all that stuff. But that collection of stuff tells the story better than anything else that has been out there, and it's in his own words. So if you're interested in a good film to really get a good sense of my dad, that is the one I would recommend the most.
That's incredible. So let's talk about the tour and the dates and where you're going to be and how many shows are you going to do.
It's 30 shows. It starts August 1st in Phoenix, Arizona. We end up in LA a few days later at the Orpheum on the 3rd of August. But it's spread out from the 1st of August to the 11th of September. And we go from the West Coast, kind of go up towards Seattle, and then head from Seattle all the way across to the East Coast with stops in between until we start heading back west and end up finishing the tour in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So it's kind of a crisscross thing, but we're on a bus and we're playing pretty much 5 or 6 shows in a row before we have any time off. And it's a lot of material to learn. We've already started rehearsing, and I've been doing this thing on my Instagram where it's a countdown to the show. So we're at 90 days till the first show today. So each day I'm doing something to show people what am I doing as I get ready for the tour. So this is one of the things I'm doing.
Yeah, which is great. I mean, I'm so glad that you came back because, it was great to have the experience to be there and go through the Deep Purple album with you, because I know so many of our listeners and viewers love that record as much as you and I do.
Well, I heard it's getting played a little bit sometimes, some of the new versions on there, and I had a few people reach out to me saying, hey, I just heard that you did this, and they didn't know anything about it, but they heard it on the radio. And
we've done it here at KLOS,
yeah.
So it's great.
That's cool.
It's very cool. And it comes full circle from you growing up and listening
to
this station as a kid, too, which is awesome.
Yeah.
If you think about it all the way around. But I'm excited about those shows. The LA show, it's at the Orpheum, right?
That's right, August 3rd.
Yeah.
And we're doing this thing with the VIP section, too, where if you are one of the people that buys a VIP ticket, I'm actually playing 2 of my dad's famous guitars on this tour. One of them is the guitar from Shut Up and Play Your Guitar, which is that Les Paul that is kind of the Sunburst one. And the other is the actual guitar he played on the Roxy and Elsewhere album. So it's the Roxy SG. But if you're one of the VIP folks, you'll be able to stand in front of those guitars and have your picture taken with those guitars in a special lineup as one of the features of the VIP thing. So it'll be cool to see them up close like that.
It's amazing. I know that you've been presented with like paintings of your dad when you've done these tours before, and a lot of what is it like? This is one of the final questions, but I wanted to ask you, Dweezil, What's it like when those folks come up and you realize how invested they are in the music, how much they love it? Because it's,
Well, I hear a lot of stories from people, and I listen to all of them because the thing about it is they're telling me something that's affected their life in a major way. Most cases, my dad's music has drastically changed somebody's view of music or of the world. So they become a different type of person as some connection to the music, and they like to share those stories, or a story about a show they saw or when they met my dad. So I don't mind at all listening to these things because it's fascinating to hear how his music and he himself changed their lives. So it's a nice little connection, and the people that come to these shows are very supportive. They're knowledgeable about the music. Sometimes they'll bring new people who've never heard the music who end up getting really into it. And, from that perspective, it's interesting because I've done this since 2006 is when I started. And some of the people that are actually in the band now are kids that heard the music through me playing it, not having heard my dad's versions. They heard my versions, and they used to watch those videos on YouTube, and now they're getting a chance to play in my band and play some of the songs that they love. So, for example, the guy that's doing a lot of lead vocals, who also plays drums and guitar in this version of the band, Zach Tabori, he was obsessed with a song called Punky's Whips.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, we got to do that song. And we haven't played it since
Your dad writes
2006.
about Punky Meadows,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
From Angel.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, but we haven't played that song since 2006.
Yeah.
And that's when he was getting into hearing it. And so it's like this really strange kind of connection, the karmic connection to everything. But now, because he's had the chance to become a member of the band, we're playing that song, and it's going to be hilarious. And we're doing it in a way we've never done it. It's going to be very theatrical. It's going to be a lot of fun. So people definitely need to check out what's different about this tour.
It's going to be incredible. Have you stayed in touch or run into ever like Flo and Eddie or?
I did do a show with them probably back in, I think it was 2012, somewhere thereabouts. Haven't been in touch with them since then so much, but those guys did some great stuff with my dad, and have a lot of talent. And
yeah, I love the Turtles, even the pop records,
Yeah.
and then the Flo and Eddie stuff they did, and then with your dad, like being a part of the band for a while and hanging out with him.
Yeah.
It's funny.
Crazy stuff.
I love that stuff, and it's it's crazy. I've been in touch with Mark just through social media, but I always say it's crazy I've never met them, just because they've done radio. They were on the radio in New York City on K-Rock, where I was on.
Yeah.
And plus all the other things. But I love that, and I think your dad recognized talent in people that were interesting, I think, and that were cool and that were willing to take chances.
That's one of the things that was a great skill of his. He could see something in someone they didn't even recognize in themselves, and then he would give them opportunities to push themselves further in directions that they probably wouldn't have pushed themselves. And that is the hallmark of the performances in a lot of my dad's music. You hear people doing things that are exceptional. And those guys got pushed to the limit with all kinds of things when it came to songs like Billy the Mountain. That's a 28-minute song with tons of stuff to remember, and there's all kinds of dialogue, and it's that kind of stuff to do nightly and remember it and then add to it and have all these things going on. That's a cool experience to be a part of. And my dad kind of described it like it was training for the military. You really had to be at the highest level, and it was a lot of discipline involved. And the guys that really benefited from that went on to do even more things. But they all said, that was the greatest period in their lives in terms of being able to stay focused and really be challenged with music in general.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. Well, I can't wait for the show at the Orpheum. I'm excited about the tour.
Thanks.
And I want to let everybody know, Dweezil, that they should check out and pick up the special edition of Machine Head, because they can experience it in a couple different ways. Again, the new stereo mix, the classic mix is on there. There's a couple live shows. But your stereo mix and the Atmos mix is just, they're incredible.
Oh, thanks. Well, it's a cool box set. It's got cool pictures and stuff, so it's definitely worth a look. If you're into Deep Purple, this is a good one for your collection.
Yeah, and good luck with the tour. I know it's going to be great.
Thanks. I appreciate
Concentrating
it.
on Apostrophe and Roxy and Elsewhere are two great albums. 74.
Yeah. Well, anybody who wants to check it out, they can just go to my website, dweezilzappa.com. It's got ticket links and all that stuff. Plus, you can see the videos of the countdown to the first day of the tour. I got at least 90 more videos I have to make to let people know what's going on.
In between rehearsing, right?
Yes.
And everything else that you got to do for the songs. Well, listen, Dweezil, thanks for coming by. It was so great to have you here on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll do it again soon.
Sounds
all right?
great. Thanks.
You got Dweezil Zappa, everyone. Thank you so much for watching and listening. KLOS New and Approved. I'm Matt Pinfield, and we'll be back with you very soon.